Hello and welcome to part 2 of sections 4 and 5 for DMA 10, multiplying and dividing integers. In the last video we discussed the rules for multiplying and dividing integers and also a division of the special case of 0. Then we did some practice with some small integers. In this video we're going to cover some practice with larger numbers and then look at some applications and word problems. Let's jump into some large digit multiplication. Our first problem here, we have negative 159 times negative 233. We're going to go ahead and place the sign so we don't forget about it later. A negative times a negative, same signs, is going to be a positive. So we know that this is going to be a positive. Okay. And then off to the side, we're going to do our multiplication. I always like to put the larger of the two numbers on the top. So it doesn't matter which, but I'm going to put 233 on top and then 159 on the bottom. Okay, and we're going to multiply these. Okay, so we're going to start with the ones digit on the bottom, that's the 9, and start multiplying. So 9 times 3 is 27, that's 7, carry the 2. 9 times 3 is 27 again, plus that 2 is 29, carry that 2. And now 9 times 2 is 18, plus 2 is going to be 20. Okay. Now, before we move on to our next line of multiplication, we have to remember to put in a 0 placeholder. And I'm going to go ahead and erase those numbers that we had on top so we don't get confused when we carry from this round of multiplication. Now we can start multiplying with the 5. 5 times 3 is 15, that's 5 in the tens place, carry the 1. 5 times 3 again is 15, plus 1 is 16, 6 carry the 1. And then 5 times 2 is going to be 10, times 1 is 11, or plus 1 is 11. Okay, now again we're going to erase those carried numbers up top and then start multiplying with our third line, but before we do that we have to put in 2 0 placeholders, one for each space that we're moving over. Okay, and then we can multiply everything by 1, that's going to be 3, 3, 2. And now that we've multiplied by every bottom number, we can add these together. So 7, 14, 4 carry the 1, it's 10, 7, and 3. So our final answer is going to be a positive 37,047. Let's do another multiplication example where we have multiple zeros. I'm going to start out slow and show you the tried and true method for multiplication and then show you a trick that will help you with multiplying by numbers that end in a lot of different zeros. So, like we did in the last one, we know that our signs are we'll choose our sign first. A negative times a negative, signs are the same. So our sign for this answer is going to be positive. We'll draw that in so we don't forget. And then we'll put the larger of the two numbers on the top, 20,000. And then the smaller number underneath. We're going to multiply these two together. Okay, we have to be very, very careful with our 0 placeholders for this one. The first number, the number in the ones place, is a 0, so we multiply everything by 0. We get 0, 0, 0, 0, and 0. Okay, so that was the first 0. Now we put in a 0 placeholder. I'm going to put my placeholders in red. And then we're going to start multiplying by the second 0. We get another string of zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay? Next line, we're going to multiply by this 2 here. We have to put in 2 placeholders because we're moving over 2 spaces. And then we get 0 times 0 is 0, 0 times 0 is 0, 0 times 0 is, or 2 times 0 is 0. We get 4 zeros, and then our last number is 2 times 2, or 4. And for our last line, we're going to have to put in 3 0 placeholders. And then start multiplying by 3. We get again 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And then 3 times 2 is 6. And we'll add these all up. We get a lot of zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 4 plus 0 is 4, and then 6 by itself is 6. So we get 64 million. And that was going to be positive, since a negative times a negative is a positive. Now I'm going to show you a trick. I'm going to line things up a little differently than we've seen them before, since we know we're going to get a whole bunch of zeros at the end of this number because we're multiplying by a few rows of 0. Here's a way to kind of simplify this and make it easier. This time I'm going to put the 3200 on the top, excuse me, because it has the most non-zero digits. Okay. I'm going to put the 20,000 on the bottom, but I'm going to line it up here. I'm going to add the first non-zero digit here, and then all the 4 zeros after it. Okay. And watch how I do this now. I know that these zeros on the end of the 20,000 are just going to give me a whole line of zeros here. So instead of writing them in the middle like I did this time, I'm just going to bring those zeros straight down, because that'll give me a line of zeros. That will, and that will. And now I'm going to start multiplying by the 2. Okay, so first we get 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 0 is 0 again, 2 times 4, 2 times 2 is going to give us 4, and 2 times 3 will give us 6. So that's kind of a more efficient way of multiplying by numbers that have a lot of zeros at the end of them. We still get the same answer, but we don't have all these lines of zeros that we multiplied by in the beginning. Either way, whichever you're most comfortable with. Cred. Let's move on to some more long division practice. We have 462 divided by negative 42. This is a positive and a negative. Okay, so we know the sign of our answer is going to be negative. Let's try. This, I don't know my times tables of 42 very well, so we're going to have to do some long division here. 462, the first number goes inside, 42 goes on the outside. Now, we start by looking at the first digit. Will 42 go into 4? No, it's much too big, so we're going to look at the second digit, 2. So 42 will go into 46, indeed. Goes in 1 time. Okay. 42 times 1 is 42. Okay. And we subtract and get 4. Next, we're going to bring down the 2. Okay. And 42 is going to go into 42 how many times? Once. 42 times 42 is 42. And then we subtract and get 0. So our answer here, since we know that it was going to be a negative, is going to be a negative 11. Here's another division example. Then we'll start by placing the sign. A negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. Let's not forget that. And then we'll start dividing. The number that we see first goes inside. Then 11 will go outside. And we can start dividing. 11 won't go into 2, but it'll go into 22 how many times? It'll go into 22 twice. And then 2 times 11 will be 22. And we subtract and we get 0. Now we can't stop dividing now, okay, because we have more numbers after this 2 right here. We still have this 5 and this 5. So even though we got a 0 as a remainder, doesn't mean we can stop. We still have to bring down these numbers and use them. Okay, so let's start doing that. We're going to bring down the first 5. Okay, so now we have 11 going into 5. Okay, it won't go in there. Okay, so we know that we're going to have to bring down this other 5, but before we do that, and this is really crucial that we don't forget this, we have to put something over this 5 right here that we couldn't divide into. We have to put a placeholder in there. So do not forget to put in a 0 placeholder, because 11 went into 5 0 times. Okay. Now we can bring down the other 5. Okay. And we have 11 into 55. 11 will go into 55 5 times. 5 times 11 is 55. And we subtract and get 0. And now we can stop. We got a remainder of 0, and we used all the numbers that were inside our dividend right there. So we have an answer. We got a positive 205. Now let's look at a word problem. During the decade of the 1990s, Russia's population decreased by about 700,000 per year because of high death rates and low birth rates. Estimate the total decline in Russia's population for the entire decade of the 1990s. So let's first pick out the important words in this problem. We have, they're the important numbers. We have 700,000, okay, and that was a decrease, right? It decreased by 700,000 per year, okay? So we're going to represent that as a negative number, negative 700,000, okay? So we're decreasing every year for a decade, okay? That's important. How many years are in a decade? Well, a decade equals, and they kind of give you a hint by saying the 1990s, a decade is 10 years. Okay, so we know that we're declining 700,000 per year over a period of 10 years. If we're declining the same amount multiple times, we see that repetition, we know we're going to have to multiply these numbers together. This is occurring at the same amount over and over again, and that is indeed the definition of multiplication. So we're going to multiply 700,000 by 10. Okay, we get a whole bunch of zeros when we multiply by 0. Okay, put in our 0 placeholder, and then we start multiplying by 1. We get 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 7. Okay, and then we add these together. So over the course of that decade, remember this was negative, positive times negative. Their population decreased by about 7 million people. Here's a second word problem. A mule train is to travel from a stable on the rim of the Grand Canyon to a camp on the canyon floor, approximately 5,500 feet below the rim. If the guide wants the mules to be rested after every 500 feet of descent, how many stops will be made on the trip? Well, let's look at this. We're going to go, we've got this descent into a canyon, okay. Our descent is 5,500 feet, and every 500 feet we go down, we're going to stop and take a break, okay? So how many of those breaks are we going to take? The way we're going to figure out that is by dividing these two numbers. We've got the total descent, which is 550, and we're breaking this into parts that are 500 feet long. So since we're breaking something up into equal parts, we're going to divide. So we have 5,500 divided by 500. Okay, so let's start. 500 won't go into 5, it won't go into 55, but it will go into 550. It'll go into 550 one time. 500 times 1 is 500. And when we subtract, we get 50. Okay, next we bring down that 0. So now we're doing 500 into 500. We know that'll go in once evenly, but we'll show that we subtract and we get 0. So we're going to make 11 stops during this trip. Make sure you don't think that this is a negative 11. We can't have a negative number of stops. Even though we're descending, we're going to stop a positive number of times. So a review for sections 4 and 5. In these sections, we went over the rules for multiplying and dividing integers. We talked about division with 0. We practiced with small and large numbers. And then we looked at some applications and word problems for multiplying and dividing integers. Now, as we continue next for section 6, we'll be looking at the order of operations. So stay tuned till next time, and good luck on your DMA section 4 and 5 homework.